But it looks as though the same excuses are being used.
In some areas, outages last for more than the allocated time, and they sometimes go on for days.
One is wondering about those that do not have a backup plan, talking about the small businesses that actually rely on power to even survive and stay open.
The total economic impact of load shedding in South Africa could be as high as 338 billion rand.
Eskom's broken promises on load shedding are catching up with the utility.
How are we going to get it right eventually? Does this have anything to do with the lack of skills and incompetence?
At this point in time, should South Africans buy these excuses from Eskom?
Eskom is now getting to a stage where it's beyond repair. We need to have urgent intervention. Otherwise, we might as well kiss our businesses and our smelters and our mining industries goodbye.
It's a defeating exercise and a defeating narrative on behalf of the consumers who have to continuously pay for power that is not being supplied.
We need to stand together and solve our energy problems, because this government is clearly incapable. Other than stealing and breaking things down, they're not capable of running a proper electricity system.
Good morning, goeiedag, Sawubona. Welcome to the Road to Election 2021 that serves as your roadmap to the local government elections. We're only 20 days, just 20 days away from one of the most important elections in the history of democratic South Africa. And once more, load shedding is back with a vengeance, a problem which has darkened our lives for almost 14 years. In 2016, the ANC's president stated that load shedding was a thing of the past. Well, that promise didn't age very well. Today, we will focus on the DA's plan to free our towns and cities from ANC load shedding and improve access to reliable and affordable electricity. If you live in Cape Town, you are already experiencing the DA difference with reduced load shedding hours due to City of Cape Town's Styan Dam storage system. The DA has also promised to make 6 municipalities in the Western Cape load shedding proof by reducing their reliance on Eskom. Today, we are excited to host leading energy experts and DA representatives to explain the detrimental effects of load shedding and unpack our plan to free your municipality from load shedding once and for all. Post your comments and questions on our Facebook and YouTube pages, or send us a voice note on 063 991 8375.
This is the Styan Dam hydroelectric power plant just outside Gordon's Bay. There's an upper Styan Dam where water is released into the lower Styan Dam through 4 generating turbines in between. During peak times, or during load shedding, water released from the upper dam into the lower dam generates up to 180 megawatts of power, keeping citizens in the city of Cape Town 1 full level lower than the rest of the country during load shedding, or with no load shedding at all. The DA-run city of Cape Town is the only city in South Africa that is able to shield its residents from the worst of load shedding, keeping the lights on for longer. That's because others talk, but the DA gets things done.
Joining me now to discuss the DA's plan to end load shedding is the DA's Cape Town Mayoral Candidate, Geordin Hill-Lewis. Welcome. And the DA Shadow Minister of Energy, Kevin Mileham. Welcome to you, Kevin. Constituency Head of Johannesburg Northwest, Bridget Masango. Welcome here. And of course, also joining us is James-Brent Styan. James is an author and expert on Eskom. He has written the book He's written the illuminating book Blackout, the Eskom Crisis. Welcome, James.
Thank you.
If I can perhaps start with you. Your book looks at the downfall of Eskom and how we find ourselves in this mess. What is at the heart of the problem, and why do you think the national government can't keep the lights on?
Thanks, Richard, for having me. Well, in essence, the book was written in 2015. And at the time, we were facing severe power restrictions already. Load shedding was already being implemented. And it sort of tried to explain where we were going and where we've come from. And essentially, the reason where we are is because under the national government, we didn't build any new capacity from 1994, new generating capacity, new power stations, until about 2007. In November 2007 was the first time we started reaching the capacity of our available capacity. In other words, the demand for electricity use had grown since 1994, when the government inherited a massive spare excess capacity in the system, which had been built up over decades. So they decided that the government in 94 decided that this excess capacity is going to be enough, and we don't have to build new generation capacity, and this eventually ran out in 2007. And the problem is that if you then start building new capacity, it's going to take you at least 10 years. So in 2007, they started very quickly building Medupi and Kusile power stations. I think too quickly, two mega-powered, mega-capacity coal-fired power stations, without, in my view, doing the proper diligence, doing the proper checks, what exactly is the best technology. So what we've ended up with is, it's now been, from 2007, it's now been, about 13 years. These power stations are still not completed. They are hopelessly over budget. Initially they were about 90 billion each. At the moment they're about 250 billion each and counting, and they're not finished yet. So the government in 2007, 2008 thought that once these mega power stations are completed by 2015 and 2018, those were the dates that were meant to be done, then we'd have no more load shedding. We'd be able to fill the gap again. Sadly, this has not turned out to be the case.
Kevin, this might be a good place to bring you in. I mean, load shedding has been a hallmark of South Africa's energy crisis since 2007. And as James was saying, when new power stations have been built, policy changes have been made, increases slightly in participation of IPPs, yet the problem persists. How do we fix this once and for all?
Well, thanks, Richard. First of all, I'm in an area where there's currently load shedding, so if my connection wobbles, that's probably the reason. But to answer your question, two things need to happen. First of all, we need to address electricity generation capacity. And secondly, we need to build better energy efficiency into our homes and businesses. Now, South Africa is a relatively energy inefficient country, and we could make huge strides just by managing our electricity better. So the DA has been making some significant gains in this regard. For example, George municipality recently covered its municipal car parks with solar panels to ease the municipality's reliance on Eskom. And Cape Town has reduced its electricity consumption in its municipal infrastructure by over 230 gigawatt hours over the last 10 years. So all of that goes to addressing the energy efficiency side of it. We urgently need to put in place an independent grid operator who will purchase electricity from Eskom and from independent power producers without fear or favor. We need a robust transmission and distribution network. So we need to be able to bring electricity in high capacity.
Seems like
load shedding has got him.
Load shedding has got Kevin, but some very good points there from Kevin. And Geordin, if I can come across to you,
Yep.
What Kevin was saying, we need to do something that people can see that we are actually doing something. And the city of Cape Town has managed to keep load shedding one level below the rest of the country. And how do they manage to achieve it?
Lines from where it's, we need to address that urgently.
Looks like load shedding up and down with Kevin. But yes.
Great. Well, thanks, Richard. Nice to be with you and to my colleagues. So the city of Cape Town has the Steenbras pump storage system up at the mountain at Solari's Pass. And that is essentially an enormous battery. And it allows the city to store power when power is at its absolute cheapest, in off-peak times or in the middle of the night, and use it when it needs to, either at high peak times or during load shedding. And it does that very effectively by simply letting the water run down the mountain and using the hydroelectric plant to generate power. And at the moment, that is enough to save Cape Town, protect Cape Town from an entire stage of load shedding. Now, of course, it's true that Steenbras Dam is quite an old facility. It was not built by the DA. But the fact is that if you look at what's happened to, Eskom is also a very old utility, Richard. It's 100 years old next year. And it has been run into the ground by mismanagement and bad political leadership. And so the point that we have made in this election campaign, and I think it remains absolutely the central point here, is that political leadership matters. A party like the DA with a track record of good governance matters. That's why these utilities still work where the DA governs, and that is why we are able to protect residents from load shedding.
And you've recently announced a 7-point plan to end load shedding in Cape Town. How will this work?
This is something that I'm really passionate about and very excited about because, firstly, to start, South Africans should not accept load shedding. I feel like we've become way too accepting of this outrageous situation for 15 years, as James says. There are 15-year-old kids in South Africa today who have never lived in a country without load shedding. And I think as South Africans, we've lowered our standards. We're to the point where this is normal. Oh, well, it's just load shedding again. We'll get takeout, or, we'll cook on gas or whatever. And that is not acceptable. It is devastating for our economy. It's devastating for jobs. And so I'm determined that we should get off load shedding and protect our residents from load shedding as soon as possible. It's going to take some time, but the door is now open. There's a small little crack in the door for municipalities, and particularly well-run municipalities like DA-run municipalities, to buy their own power from independent power producers, and crucially to buy their own storage capacity from producers. And that will give us the ability, in addition to the things that Kevin has been speaking about, increasing efficiency and making sure that our big industrial users are as efficient as possible. Those two things together can actually get us to a point where Cape Town can be the first city in the country that's load shedding free. And I think that that's going to be an amazing boon for our local economy. And I'm absolutely determined to see it happen. I know it's going to be difficult, and I know that Geordin Hill-Lewis, our National Minister of Energy, will put every roadblock in our way that he can, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But we've got to get over those roadblocks and make sure that we can protect our residents from load shedding.
Thank you, Jordan. I believe Kevin is back with us. Welcome, Kevin. Looks like the load shedding gremlin did get hold of you, but you were telling us the best way we can go about fixing this problem.
Yeah, so just to build on what Jordan has just said, one of the things that we need to address at a municipal level is our distribution system. And the starting point of doing that is to get rid of illegal connections. Now, that's easier said than done, but you do that by legitimizing connections. You do that by putting in proper electricity supply to indigent households. You do that by providing them with a metered connection. But there's a sort of a corollary to that, and that is that you must maintain a proper indigent register, because those people are entitled to free basic electricity. And so you've got to have a proper indigent register in place in order to make sure that those people that you are supplying are entitled to it and are getting it. So that's a very, very important first step. We need to make sure that we have robust distribution systems at a municipal level. We also need to encourage investment in electricity generation, both on a household level and a utility scale. So both large-scale power plants and rooftop solar for businesses and homes. And to do that, we've previously spoken about incentivizing the installation of rooftop solar, and Jordan, I'm sure, would be able to give you a lot more detail on that, but to the effect of a 75,000 Rand tax rebate that we believe could make a huge inroad into getting people to install solar on their houses. And then lastly, we need to make it easier for municipalities to procure electricity directly from independent power producers and to generate their own electricity. And there's a lot of progress being made internationally and locally, for that matter, on waste power systems, where on the one hand, you're getting rid of landfill sites, but you're also generating electricity while you do that. And this is something that we should be exploring a lot more, and we should be making it easier for those municipalities that have the financial resources and the technical capabilities to do so, to actually provide their own electricity and step away from Eskom as a supplier.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I just want to, we've been talking about Cape Town and how we managed to be one stage lower than everyone else. But Bridget, you are the constituency head for northwest of Gauteng, and in areas you're responsible for, load shedding can be 24 hours or longer. It's not just an hour or two or three. You've run a number of petitions on this, yes. But what are the residents going through? What are they experiencing?
Thanks, Richard. The residents in the areas in my constituency are experiencing the effects of poor, crumbling infrastructure on the one hand, and the lack of response or communications from City Power, where a resident would report, get what now they call a useless reference, and that doesn't mean anything. There was a time when having a reference meant that after a certain period of time, you must have gotten a problem solved, and then if that doesn't happen, then you must escalate it. But it does not matter. As you said earlier, there are people in places like Bromhof, in places like Sonnenglans, where they've not had electricity, for example, this last weekend for over 30 hours. And those are people who are working from home due to COVID-19. Those are people who have children that must go to school, who must prepare meals and things like that. So they are experiencing a huge problem over a lot of years that this has been going on. So you that's where you come in and say, let me send a petition. Maybe that will, make the government realize that this problem is huge. But that is what they're experiencing.
And the frustrations on the ground must be horrific. I mean, it's more than a massive inconvenience. It absolutely disrupts anything you try and do. And I'm thinking of children who need to study and do homework and that sort of thing.
I mean, the residents that would call me because they have spoken to a councillor who's also trying to speak to City Power and whoever else that they can speak to. But the fact of the matter is, whatever it is that you do, if at the back end there is no system that is working, once City Power sends teams out on site, you find that the technical resources are not available, or if the technical people are there, you find that there's no stock. They say, oh, we have just been told that there's no stock, so we have to wait for procurement to actually order the parts. The guy who reported this is just waiting for electricity, and this is why it takes so long for people to get. The system is crumbling, to say the least, and the effects of that are just dire. It's amazing.
Kevin, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, if I may. Sorry to interrupt you, Bridget. I thought you were done. Richard, I just want to add that we've seen in the last couple of weeks water outages, several days of water outages in Gauteng that have been as a result of electricity infrastructure failures, and that's something that. We talk about the impact of electricity on business and homes and things like that, but now we're starting to see the impact on water distribution and availability to both businesses and homes as well.
Yeah.
And exactly what you're saying with the water infrastructure, but it also impacts on the economy, because if you can't have electricity and your operations can't run, then you can't work.
Richard, can you imagine trying to run a manufacturing business in South Africa today, where you have got a business that runs entirely on heavy machinery, and you've got deadlines to meet, you've got customers around the world waiting for your product, you've got 24-hour municipal outages because of crumbling infrastructure, and even when the municipal infrastructure is working, you've got load shedding. No wonder. We saw a graph the other day, I'm sure some of you will have seen it, of the steeply declining manufacturing employment in South Africa, just falling off a cliff.
Steel in particular.
And, I mean, is it any mystery why that's happening? Manufacturing businesses are closing down by the dozens. And load shedding is a big reason why that's happening. And that's why I'm so passionate about sorting this out in Cape Town, because imagine we could go to a small manufacturing business in Bridget's constituency, say, you know what, there is one place in South Africa where the DA governs, where you can actually relocate your business if you want to, and you can at least, there's still a lot of other difficult things in doing business in South Africa, but at least you can have security, the lights will be on, the machines will keep running.
And if you go out and vote for the DA in a lot of these constituencies and areas, you know, the DA can bring that to you at some point as well. I mean, it's something very... James, you want to...
Yeah, just two very brief points to add to what they've been saying. It's not only big manufacturers, just the small mom and pop shop making hamburgers or having to warm up or keep drinks cold in a little shop, corner shops. SMMEs are really struggling. I mean, you can't keep stuff cold anymore. You can't keep stock long because you don't have any way of storing it. You don't know if your shop's going to be open. So despite, never mind the COVID situation, you've also got the electricity problem.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other point I also wanted to add is the second hammer blow, and that's the cost of electricity. So over the past, I think it's since 2007, the cost of electricity, the tariffs have gone up by about 500%.
Yeah.
So it was less than 10 cent a kilowatt hour in 2007. It's now about R1.40, R1.50. The cost is astronomical, and it keeps going up. Eskom at the moment is getting a 15% increase per year for the next 3 years. 15% on this already high tariff. So you are not able to operate your business optimally and get your income in as you should, but you are expected to pay ever increasing costs for an ever unreliable supply of electricity. It's a triple slam. A final point, if I may, just going to Johannesburg, is the importance of managing your municipal accounts, and your city power accounts would be included. If you don't collect the money's owed, you can't invest in the infrastructure. So City Power, out of every 100 units that they buy from Eskom to resell, they only collect about 60 units back. So 40 units is either being stolen or being lost to technical losses, they call it. So if you're only collecting 60% of your revenue that you should be collecting, that 60% tends to go to your salaries and your wages, and there's no money left to replace the transformers that are blowing and the cables that have been stolen. Finally, you've also got the police that obviously has to play a role, especially in Joburg with the vandalism that's going on. But this seems to be increasing, and that again is linked to the high cost of electricity.
It is increasing.
But also the point of, if I can just quickly say, the point of the illegal connections. I mean, it's incredibly dangerous to life. We've seen a number of people, unfortunately, children included, that are getting killed or badly injured, and it's causing fires. I mean, it's just something that's not sustainable.
No, that's quite so. I just wanted to touch on I love this point about the economy, and I just want to come back to this as well. There's a point to add to what James has said about the price that South Africans have paid. Not only has the price gone up nearly 500% during load shedding, we've also spent, what is it, James, close to 500 billion rand on 2 of the world's largest coal power stations, which, by the way, every South African has paid for, either by debt, more government debt, or bailouts, 230 odd billion in bailouts over the last decade, and higher taxes. All of that gets paid for by higher taxes. So the blows just keep coming for ordinary South Africans. It's higher prices, higher taxes, higher debt, higher bailouts, all to pay for Eskom that still isn't working.
Yes.
And Bridget, I mean, I know we're talking about 24-hour and longer blackouts.
Yes.
Do the people have any hope? I mean, I know you have petitions and you speak to them, but I can imagine that it must be difficult for them. Have people just given up?
Well, you have people who say, we're talking about hope, we're running a Hood for Hope program or campaigning in the areas that I'm talking about. You either have a person that say, yes, and they hood away, and you have people that just are saying, are you mad? I mean, things are so bad. But you will find that people are saying, all we want is just electricity. They no longer even say that, talk about the amount of money that they are paying, which is huge, but they just want to keep going. And I believe that the message that we are sending out as the Democratic Alliance is actually giving them that hope that should the government of the Democratic Alliance take over the city of Johannesburg, that hope can be realized. Because you are sitting in places like Bromhof, in places like North Riding, that whenever the load shedding happens, their system or their little, I don't know, do you call them what, transformers or whatever, they get broken and then they have another 24 hours to wait for electricity while that is being sorted. And this has been happening for years. It's not an issue of just a few years or something. It's been happening long, and no investment has been made in sorting out these transformers. No investment has been made into realizing that these very areas are experiencing a very high residential development growth, where more people are coming into a system or into an infrastructure that is more crumbling than actually being fixed or even upgraded to take in the people that are coming in. So these problems are really not being mitigated in any way. They're just left to happen. And people are saying, what is my property worth? Because I have more no electricity than having it. And so what is it that I'm sitting here for? Actually talking about a government that's better. When we were doing the calling campaign, you phone a person and say, no, I've moved to the Western Cape. I'm no longer in Johannesburg. Because you don't say that to them, but you say to at the back of your mind, you're saying that's probably why they want to be in a DA-run government, because things are just so bad. And if the government does not sort out the infrastructure that is crumbling, and if they don't invest in the running of city power and all that it needs, we will not have any infrastructure to actually maintain, as it were.
Yeah.
And at the receiving end of that is the residents that are saying, what are we paying these taxes and rates for if we can't get electricity that is reliable?
Yeah, and I mean, it's clear that the Western Cape is doing all it can to try and bring an end to load shedding. But Kevin, if I can bring you back in here, at national level, there seems to be a bit of a tug of war between the president and the minister. That's not helping, surely.
Not at all. Just this last week, Gwede Mantashe and Cyril Ramaphosa presented wildly differing views on South Africa's energy future, with Mantashe promoting coal and nuclear and Ramaphosa stressing the need for investment in renewables. Now, let's be very, very honest here. And James, you're going to like this comment. We are going to be dependent on coal and nuclear for the foreseeable future. But we should be investing now in a long-term future of decarbonizing our electricity generation. And that means that we've got to invest in renewables, amongst other things. We should be reviewing our guiding policy, the integrated resource plan, to see if we're on track and where we need to make changes. And Minister Mantashe seems to have thrown this out the window and is writing his own playbook at the moment. And all of this is causing delays and problems. And one example of this would be the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producers Procurement Program, which was widely regarded as one of the best in the world. And it went through 4 bid windows successfully. Then you get to 2015 and Brian Mileham and Eskom refused to sign power purchase agreements with the independent power producers. And so the program comes to a grinding halt for a period of about 5 years, at a time where we have seen a massive decline in the cost of renewable energy generation. It's recently been restarted, and there is a lot of interest in the program, but we've lost 5 years that could have been used to build our electricity generation capacity just in that one small sector. So, yeah, there's a lot of policy tug of war, and it is causing a lot of delays, a lot of problems, a lot of issues for our ability to restart our economy and grow our economy successfully.
James, you want to weigh in on that?
Look, it's a very difficult debate, which one requires lots of time for. I think I generally agree with what Kevin says. I think that there's a dire lack of, just going back to the policy and the things that are supposed to be guiding us. So we are supposed to be guided as a national government. You don't just blindly throw money at something. You should be guided by forecasts, population growth, urban hubs, where are people moving to? You should be guided by things like environmental considerations. What is the world going to do when South African products need to be going and be sold in Europe? And Europe says we don't buy stuff that are made in a carbon-heavy economy. You need to be guided by these sorts of forecasts. So you need a plan, a clear plan. And this plan, as Kevin indicated, is called the IRP. And by law, it's meant to be updated every 2 years. Now, this plan in the last 12 years, I think, has been updated once. And without a clear plan that is understandable, that is based on fact, that is based on evidence, we can't invest. But at the this isn't happening. And I think that a big part of the reason is that at national government level, we don't have the skills in the Department of Energy. I mean, the minister, with respect to him, the national minister, comes from a mining unionist background, What does he, with respect again, really know about the intricacies of the different technologies that he's punting and promoting? Who is advising him? We don't know. These are the sort of issues that we need to get clarity about so that we say we need by 2030 we need to have 7,000 new megawatt plants. For example, we need to have, this is an example, we would need, let's say, 10,000 megawatts new. So what do? Do we build wind turbines? Do we build solar plants? Do we build coal? Do we build nuclear? This debate isn't really happening at the moment. We have uncertainty. And we're floundering around. It's 2021. If we start building a mega plant now, I mean, we've seen with the experience of Kusile and Medupi, it takes longer than 10 years. So people must understand load shedding is going to be here for at least 10 years and longer. No question. But investment in renewables, what that brings to the table is it's the private sector who isn't bankrupt comes and builds their own plant, and then you need to buy the electricity from them. So the difference is you're not relying on Eskom, which is technically bankrupt. They are sitting with 400 billion rands worth of debt. They are technically bankrupt. They made a 20 billion loss this year. So they cannot build new power plants. They can't. So who's going to build it? It can only be the private sector. So we need to speed it up, and we need to have clarity with a plan moving forward. And both of this isn't happening.
Well, that comes to my next question. I'd like everyone to give me a comment on this. And I'm not going to go to power ships. I mean, let's just keep away from the power ships at the moment. But can Eskom be saved?
You're asking me, Richard?
Yes, I'm asking everyone. We'll start with you.
Look, my personal view is Eskom should be saved. I think that there is a role for Eskom to play. I disagree completely with the idea to break it up into three parts. I think that you're going to create a more complex structure with three different entities where you've got one entity at the moment. So imagine having three Escoms, which functions the way Eskom functions now. There's no guarantee that if you break it up like people are suggesting, that it's going to operate optimally. I don't see that. So I think that Eskom can be saved. It needs the proper, correct political will. I've been saying it from the beginning, in the book, etc. Without proper political will from national government side, supporting Eskom, backing the leadership. If the leadership says, listen, we're sitting with 40,000 people, we can't afford the salary wage bill, which is on average 700,000 rand per person, we need to cut 20,000 people. If this needs to be done to save Eskom, it needs to be done. If Soweto doesn't pay its electricity, the action needs to be taken, but it can only be done on a political level. And this hasn't been happening. So yes, Eskom, I think, can be saved, but you need the right political will from the national government, and it's not coming.
Kevin, could it? Should it?
Honestly, I don't think it should. But the reality is that we need Eskom, and we need the electricity that it generates. Now, James and I disagree on this, and he knows my position on it. But I do think we need to split Eskom, and I think we need to split the distribution, which is essentially a municipal competency, and give that to all the municipalities. Let them manage their own distribution, and let them rise or fall on their ability to do that simple job. Then we need to break out the grid, and we need to make that independent of the generation side of Eskom. We need to make it completely independent. It needs to be in government hands, yes, but there should be a strong private sector component on the board that is giving input and making it a little bit more independent, so that they operate without fear or favor and purchase from, whether it's Eskom or a wind farm or a solar farm or whatever it might be, with complete independence. Then Eskom could carry on in the generation space, and that's where the bulk of their asset investment is in the generation space. And they would stay on in that particular capacity with whatever power plants they are able to build, operate, manage, and maintain.
Thank you, Kevin. While we're on that, I mean, this is great for us to discuss here with the knowledge and the experience of our experts here in the studio. How do we explain this to the public, Bridget? What do we say to them?
Well, what the public knows about Eskom, for example, and all the other government entities is that they are just gripped by corruption. Because I agree that where there is political will, that must be balanced by the eradicating corruption. And we don't see that happening in the current government, and the people are waiting. So what I would tell a person is that you have given this government to run Eskom for the last 27 years. Can you then give it your vote to a different government and that has a track record of doing things right, of good governance, of no corruption or no tolerance to corruption at all, to then run government-owned entities like Eskom so that you can see the change that you would want to see in your lifetime, as it were?
John?
I think that the simple message from my perspective, we've got two energy experts here, so I'll defer to them. But from my perspective, I think that the idea of having this enormous government monopoly that is responsible for everyone's electricity is an outdated model that is suitable to the 20th century or even perhaps the 19th century and will not exist into the future. That Eskom may continue to exist, but it will be a much smaller player in a much more diverse and competitive electricity market. But here's the key point. I think James makes the key point. Load shedding will be with us in South Africa for the foreseeable future because regardless of whether it can be fixed, Eskom will not be fixed in the near future because of politics, because it is run effectively by the ANC. And for that reason, I think the most important thing for DA governments to do is now to boldly and assertively step into that space and, as I've said, kick down that door and say we are going to take more of a role in this and help to usher in this new competitive electricity market for South Africa. So ultimately we can serve the voters by protecting them from the failure of Eskom.
Great. It's been wonderful getting all these points of view, but we have been taking comments and questions throughout the show from our viewers, and Kevin, Geordin, James and Bridget will answer these questions straight after this.
Have you noticed how, when most of South Africa gets that dreaded load shedding notification, Cape Town often gets a clear forecast? This is with the help of the Steenbras Pumped Storage Power Scheme, which picks up the slack whenever possible. The DA-led city of Cape Town is a perfect example of how governments can innovate to make our power supply more reliable. They are leading the way by installing rooftop solar systems on city buildings, by retrofitting traffic and streetlights with LED lamps, and by installing smart electricity meters. The city's waste-to-energy project is even working to turn the harmful greenhouse gas the city extracts from our rubbish into electricity. This is all in pursuit of keeping the lights on. If we look to the DA-run Western Cape at large, a priority is to enhance the uptake of rooftop solar PV at businesses, such as on the roof of this Cape Town shopping centre. Because we've got to keep our economy working. DA-run governments are also promoting innovation through the installation of solar panels on the roofs of schools and clinics so that these facilities can keep operating during load shedding. In fact, the DA is on a nationwide mission to free all South Africans from Eskom's monopoly. This includes urging our national government to open up our grid and allow the private sector to compete with Eskom to supply electricity on a level playing field. To change the law so businesses and individuals can sell the extra electricity they generate onto the grid for others to use. To offer a 75,000 Rand tax rebate to cover the cost of installing solar systems in homes to take the pressure off the grid. To zero-rate VAT on LED light bulbs and energy-efficient appliances. And to allow municipalities to purchase power directly from independent power producers rather than having to rely on Eskom. The DA is doing everything possible to get our national government to step aside and let the private sector, provinces and municipalities get on with the job of keeping the lights on, keeping businesses and industry working and ensuring that our economy grows.
Welcome back. Quite an illuminating discussion we've had here this morning. And of course, we have asked for calls from viewers. And the first one we have here is from Mfuleni in Gauteng.
We are here in Gauteng, Zone 7, Mfuleni municipality. I am a resident of this community. We have been out of electricity for the past 2 weeks. It is very frustrating. And we do not even bother to report such cases to our councillor anymore because he is not responsive to our queries, to anything that concerns this ward. So last year we also had an incident where a transformer was stolen from this ward, and we did report to the councillor. He's an ANC councillor. We did report to Eskom itself, and Eskom told us that they are not going to replace the stolen transformer. Therefore, the community had to sit over a year without electricity until they decided that they will take out money from their own pockets and buy the transformer. And they hired the very same Eskom people to come and install the transformer. So the situation is very bad here. Electricity is a major issue. We need help as a matter of urgency.
Exactly what you were saying, Bridget. What do we say to people like this caller?
This is really the issue that needs to be taken at, as we said earlier on, at government level, local government level. And with the local government, especially Mfuleni has been, potholes there are like huge dongas. Sewage is spilling everywhere. So this is just adding on a huge layer of mismanagement of everything by the local government of the ANC, which is why the people of Mfuleni must come on board and say we're changing our vote so that this can change. There is a clear plan on electricity, on each and every aspect of local government that the Democratic Alliance has at the moment, and people must just change their voting.
I think, Jordan, quite concerning that call as well, that community buying their own transformer.
Yeah.
We're seeing communities have to take local government responsibility upon themselves when it really shouldn't be like that.
And pay taxes.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, this is really a South African story now, isn't it, Richard? We're seeing the large-scale, devastating collapse of small towns and large cities, which are ANC run across the country. We've got situations now where NGOs, charity organizations, are delivering basic services for entire towns. Yep. I think that might actually be the case in Kevin's constituency, the ANC run of town of Grahamstown. You've got situations where ratepayers organizations are going to court to get permission to deliver basic services in their towns and take over municipal functions. And that's why we're saying this local government election is not just about national politics and corruption. It's also about saving your town where you live and making sure that you can get good government that can start the long process of turning this around. And it will be difficult because, as Bridget says, some of these, and the caller says, some of these things are so bad now that it's almost beyond repair.
They can't be saved.
But we can start the process.
We have another caller now coming from Duchwa in the Eastern Cape.
Ndithetha ndlula apha eNgumbela apha eDutywa ke ngolwesibini ndaqomba inyama yabo yintle mandithathe ndidibanise so that sizoba nenyama apha endlini until impela nyanga. Into ke yenzekileyo kumke umbane kule nto ye-load shedding phaa eMalanga. Savuka umbane engekho futhi kucaba kuthe xa ibuya waqhushumba loo nto iqhushumbayo ke. Hayi ke into yenzekileyo ke ngoku yonke laa nyama iphansi ingamanzi asinakwazi noba siyitye ngoku. Sawubona uba kuzawuthini na kusobuya ke lo mbane uba sawuthi sithini na ekupheleni kwenyanga.
Sure.
Yeah. That is a very sad story of a person who bought a lot of meat from a butchery, and then when they arrived home in a Dutra, they found that there was no electricity. So that whole meat got rotten, and now they're sitting without food and no electricity. And this is another example of how the effects of lack of political will, of systems mismanagement can actually affect every single person on the street, and it has to change. Yeah. It just has to change.
Kevin, I know you wanted to come in there. Thank you, Bridget.
Yeah, Richard, I actually wanted to touch on the previous caller, and I wanted to compare Mfuleni with the municipality right next door to it, which is Midvaal, one of the DA-run municipalities and one of the best-run municipalities in the country. Mfuleni is one of the worst-run municipalities in the country. And it shows in the service delivery statistics of those two municipalities. And it shows that where you have good governance, you are able to deliver good services. And that's something that I just want to touch on. But the story is equally, or the answer that I've just given is equally true in Duchwa, because if you go through that municipality, it is shockingly bad, the condition of service delivery in that municipality. And a lot of it relates to corruption, a lot of it relates to maladministration, a lot of it relates to pure politics. The fact that there isn't, and James touched on it earlier, there is a lack of political will to actually do what needs to be done for the people on the ground.
Yeah, we've heard about Midville quite a lot in this election campaign, and there's no doubt. I mean, it's an island of excellence in a sea of despair, and people are referring to it as the ideal, what people should be doing. I think, yes, we have another caller. This one is from Cape Town in the Western Cape.
As a small business owner of more than 3 decades, I have to say that I've had my ups and downs. But by far the most challenging has been the ongoing load shedding. It's not even load shedding, it's power outages. It's a slow and not so quiet decimation of my business. It's really, really difficult when you're in manufacturing, when you're in custom-made products, and you rely on power. When you're in SMME, you do less than 3.5 million rand turnover a year. You can't afford 500,000 rand in terms of generator capacity. You have to rely on your power that comes through your plugs. The only saving grace is that we're in the city of Cape Town, and that more often than not, we're able to be on a lower level of load shedding. So when Eskom are on stage 3, we'll be on stage 2. But if we don't produce, we don't get paid. And if we don't get paid, I can't pay my staff. It's beyond stressful. So all I can say is that more strength to the people who are trying to ensure that the Western Cape, and specifically Cape Town, are free of Eskom and this abusive monopoly of power. And I mean that in every significant term, the abuse of power. We need to ensure that we have an ongoing, consistent and strong supply of power to our citizens and to our small businesses. We are the heartbeat of the economy. Without us, there is no significant employment.
That's exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I didn't get the caller's name, but thank you so much for that comment. That's exactly what I've been saying. And this is why I'm so passionate about this issue and so passionate about helping you as a small business owner make your life easier, make it easier for you to grow your business, to employ more people, and ultimately get more people out of poverty and unemployment in South Africa. So people like that caller are really heroes of our country. They are working day and night to build their businesses and to invest in our economy and pay their taxes and employ people, crucially employ people. And we are just making it so unbelievably hard for them to succeed because of all of these things we put in their way. And so if we in the DA can help in one small way, or not so small way, by removing load shedding, then I think that will have made a huge difference.
And there's a message coming in on my phone from JP Bayers saying, how will a load shedding free Cape Town impact on our pockets? Are we going to have to pay a lot more?
The idea is actually the opposite, JP, so that we can try to reduce the cost of electricity over time. Remember, as James said and as we discussed earlier, prices for Eskom power have gone up 500% over the last 15 years, roughly. So the reason that you are paying so much for electricity is because that price has just gone relentlessly up. And as James reminded us, 15% a year for the next 3 years on the way, JP, I'm afraid to say. So what we've got to do is reduce reliance on Eskom. And the more that we can reduce reliance on Eskom, the more that we can pass those savings on over time to consumers. And that's what I'm really excited about. So it's not just about ending load shedding. That's the biggest and most obvious benefit. But it's also about putting some of that money back in people's pockets.
Thank you. We also have a question here from Petrus Kutsia. Perhaps James and Kevin can come in here, where he says, Eskom must have competition in the marketplace. It's the only way. Comment on that?
Of course, no, they should have competition. But we mustn't forget how big Eskom is. Eskom generates 94% of all the electricity in this country. So anyone who thinks that you're going to reduce Eskom to a small player is living in a dream world. So of course Eskom needs more competition, and of course the competition that comes in needs to be treated fairly and without bias, which is why the independent operator, as indicated by Kevin, would be an important aspect. Of course they need more electricity, but again you need the proper policies, you need the proper political will from the top, and you need a plan. What kind of competition should we get? Which generators should we welcome? Should it be ships? Should it be wind turbines? What should it be?
And Kevin, are we moving into the right space with IPPs?
We are. Look, as James and I have both said, we are likely to need Eskom for the foreseeable future. We can't escape that fact. But what we need to do now is prioritize the opening of our electricity generation sector. And it's something that we as the DA are taking active steps to do to inoculate our municipalities from Eskom's ongoing failures. So, for example, in the Western Cape, the provincial government has set up a municipal energy resilience fund, which allows or assists municipalities to put in place policies, bylaws, and procedures and look at how they can move away from Eskom independence. There's also a lot of red tape and petty politics, the red tape being primarily driven by the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, and the politics largely the influence of the coal and nuclear lobbies led by Mr. Coal himself, Minister Geordin Hill-Lewis. So we are seeing some moves towards the privatization of electricity generation in South Africa, but it's not happening anywhere near quickly enough.
I just want to come in quickly and just say something, Kevin. There's lobbying being done by the renewable industry as well. So it's not only the coal and the nuclear industry that have their lobbyists. The renewables industry certainly has their lobbyists as well. And what we don't seem to have, or the debate we don't seem to have, which in my view is a balanced, fair debate considering all technologies and all considerations. Right. It's an either or. Instead of saying what is the best idea for the country, not for the next 3 years, not for the next 10 years, for the next 50 years, for the next 100 years. No one is looking long term. No one is saying, we're all trying to put a finger in the dike now, but the dam wall is breaking. And we need to have a proper policy and understanding moving forward. So yes, lobbying certainly happens, but I think it happens across the board.
But the difference is, if I may disagree with James, the difference is that the highest paid and most senior coal lobbyist in the country is the minister. And he's the decision maker as well. So it's not fair lobbying. If it was fair lobbying, it would be one thing. But we have a fossil fuel dinosaur as a minister of energy. And he is absolutely blocking the investment in renewables and greater competition for Eskom in the market and the opening up of the energy market. And I must say, I really think that the biggest handbrake on the South African economy today is Minister Geordin Hill-Lewis.
But I see you have been taking some look into the book there during the break.
Every household should have one,
along with some candles.
Thanks very much. If I could just ask each of you now, as a final thought, if someone's put you on the spot and said, right, you need to talk to South Africa, the whole of South Africa is watching you, and they want to know what is the way forward, what is the best way to handle this, what is your take on ending load shedding? Bridget, perhaps we can start with you.
Well, I think this discussion, this debate has actually provided that in a very succinct and significant way to say we have a situation where we are stuck with Eskom, but stuck with Eskom will need some very, very big changes in terms of political will, and it will also need to open the playing field where other providers of electricity, of energy, must come in and be given the space to actually put their plans ahead. And also, we need to make sure that whatever is happening, we have some kind of a cushion for the end user of this electricity that we're talking about. Because while we're doing all these talkings and plans and things like that, already people are suffering on the ground. And those are the people that I come from into this debate, people that are just having nightmares because there is no electricity at the moment. So this is a bus that we have to fix while it's moving, and we need to fix it fast. Because if we do nothing, we will not have any infrastructure to maintain or to fix, because there will be no infrastructure. Someone said earlier on that we have infrastructure in Johannesburg that is as old as 80 years. And how then do you expect people to live in an environment like that?
Jordan?
I would say very simply, Richard, to voters in this election and members of the public across the country, if you are sick and tired of load shedding, as I am, if you are sick and tired of the impact of load shedding on your life or your business or your family, then there is only one party in this election that has presented a positive plan to reduce the impact of load shedding and finally end load shedding over time. And that is the Democratic Alliance. The track record speaks for itself. And a vote for the DA on the 1st of November is a vote to end load shedding over time.
Thank you, Jordan. James?
What was the question again? A message for the future to end load shedding. Look, hold our public executives more accountable. Insist on a proper plan. What is our plan? How are we going to get out of load shedding, national government? How are you going to stop load shedding, national government? How are you going to save Eskom because they are sitting with a crippling debt, national government? We don't have answers to these questions. Who is leading these are critical questions and we don't have answers. Become part of the debate, ask the questions and hold people accountable. And then there's lots more technical questions. Which technology should we get? But we won't go into that.
Kevin?
Thanks, Richard. I think that there are two elements to this. And the first is that there is a lot of work that needs to be done at a national level to ensure that South Africa has the electricity that it needs going forward. But equally, there is a lot of work that can be done at a local government level. And that's exactly what we've shown here today. It's what Jordan has been talking about. And it's what the DA's solutions are for municipalities to assist them to become free or less reliant on Eskom. And the only party that is putting a concrete plan on the table in that regard is the Democratic Alliance.
And of course, when we talk about ending load shedding, there's also a responsibility to do it in the best environmentally friendly way possible. Take a look at this. Thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to see load shedding become a distant memory in DA cities and towns. There can be a brighter future for us all by voting DA in the upcoming election. Stay tuned to our social media for further details on tomorrow's broadcast, when we'll be unpacking the DA's manifesto on the topics of crime and governing in the interests of the people. We hope you've enjoyed the show. See you again tomorrow from myself and the guests who are here today. Good morning. Have a great day. Hamba Khashle.
The Democratic Alliance spends your money on delivering services where we are in charge. Unemployment is the lowest and we do not tolerate corruption. Even the national government admits the best run municipalities are all governed by the DA. But the choice is yours. You can choose collapsing basic services or streets that are maintained and clean. You can choose to live in chaos and fear, or the protection of thousands of local law enforcement officers. You can choose blackouts and the devastation of livelihoods. Or you can choose a DA government that is creating jobs and working to become load-shedding free. The DA is the only party that brings all South Africans together, and the only party big enough to bring positive change to your municipality. In this election, choose the DA, because the DA gets things done.